Everybody's troubled in today's readings. Elijah is running away from Jezebel. So he's really in trouble because he's spoken against her and she's out to get him. Paul isn't in trouble, but he's troubled, as he says. I'm concerned. I have a great concern for my people who are not accepting Jesus as they should. And of course, the disciples in the boat on the lake are definitely in trouble. So everybody in today's readings is in trouble. And it's interesting to see that in each case, God intervenes in the life of these people, but doesn't always take away the trouble, doesn't always take away their concerns. Even though Elijah had an intimate experience of God in that wee small voice, there was no God breaking into his life with an earthquake or a volcano and changing everything and doing away with Jezebel and making him safe. That didn't happen. But his experience of God gave him the confidence and the courage to keep on going with the work that God had given him to do. By this time in history, Paul certainly has come to the solution of his questions about his people, even though the church today still puzzles over what the relationship of Christians should be to Jewish people. That hasn't been solved in our minds yet. God has not intervened and shown us exactly how we are to deal with our brothers and sisters of the covenant. Indeed, over the centuries, we have made a lot of mistakes in regarding our brothers and sisters of the covenant. Historically speaking, the horrors of the last century, the anti-Semitism which led to the Holocaust, has its root in the Christian church, in our discipleship. So we're still troubled by that relationship. And of course, whenever you hear of the ship on the waters, the image is always that of the church itself. And let's remember, we don't belong to the church. We are the church. So when we hear about the bark of Peter being lashed about on the ocean by the waves and the troubles of the time, we're talking about troubles that we are now experiencing as a church. And whether it's the scandals of the clergy or the fact that many of our brothers and sisters are being driven out of their homes because of their faith in Jesus, as is the case in the Near East today in Mosul. Mosul is a city which has never ceased to have Mass for 1,600 years. And now there's no Mass in Mosul because our Christian brothers and sisters have been driven out. So there's always these troubles for the church. And it's interesting that in each of these cases, God does not intervene to take away the problems. God does not make everything nice. But he comes into our lives, as Jesus did, walking on the troubled waters, to give us the courage and the power and the will to keep trusting in him, loving God and each other, despite the fact that the troubles don't disappear. The original translation in English of the time when Jesus came walking on the water said, in the fourth watch of the night. Well, they changed that to early morning. It actually means 3 o'clock in the morning. And that's the time most of us are troubled. Isn't that true? We can't sleep because of the arthritis, or because we're waiting for somebody to come home who is still out, or because all those problems and situations in our lives always seem to rise to the surface at a time when we're not distracting ourselves with other things, which usually means early, very early in the morning. Well, the church is like that. All of us, the whole body of Christ, is distracted and troubled by many, many things, and always has been, and always will be until the Lord returns. But in the meantime, if we permit God to come to us, as Elijah experienced, as Paul certainly has and did, and as Jesus comes across the water to the church of his day, he comes to us also, not to take away the problems of life, but to sustain us to give us confidence, to give us that trust in Him which will enable us to love one another.